My name is Betty. I've been working in an office at a small company since I graduated from college. I've always been rather plain looking, which didn't make me very popular with guys, resulting in few romantic opportunities. Before I knew it, I was in my 30s without a boyfriend, feeling lonely and worried about never getting married. I decided to take a leap of faith and signed up for a dating app. That's how I met and married my husband, Daniel. Daniel is 2 years younger than me, at 28, handsome and tall. He works in sales at a well-known company and is honestly way out of my league. Daniel is a kind-hearted man. He insisted that the bride should be the star of the wedding and let me have our ceremony in my hometown. Since my hometown is in the countryside, most of Daniel's friends couldn't attend, so he invited only a few close ones. Daniel told me, "If Betty's happy, that's good enough for me," and encouraged me to invite a lot of my friends to the celebration. Little did I know who Daniel really was, but I felt blessed being surrounded by many friends at our wedding. That's when the shocking event happened. One day, I came home from work to find Daniel playing video games. I assumed he got off work early and started preparing dinner. As I nearly sliced my finger, he dropped a bombshell. He had quit his job. "You quit without discussing it with me?" I asked, astonished. "There's nothing to discuss. For adults, I can make my own career decisions," he replied. Now, sure, adults can make their own decisions, but aren't you supposed to consult your spouse before making such a significant life change? Shocked by the sudden news, I felt we needed a serious talk. Without taking his eyes off the game, Daniel answered my questions. "Why did you quit your job? Did something bad happen?" I asked. "My boss was incompetent. I think there's a better place for me out there," he said. "A better place like where?" I pressed. "I'll figure that out, man. You're so annoying." "Marrying an older woman is like being with my mom," he retorted. This wasn't the first time Daniel had mentioned my age. Each time I would counter, "Then why did you marry me?" He would casually reply, "Because a complicated woman like Betty needs a stable guy like me," which would always spark an argument. This time, I chose not to retort. The main issue at hand was our future lifestyle. It was clear that with Daniel quitting his job, we couldn't maintain our current way of life. "Daniel, we're also sending money to your parents. Remember, their rent is high, and if you're not working, there's no way my income alone can support both households." This had become a concern shortly after Daniel and I got married. Both of Daniel's parents, still in their 50s, had quit their jobs, claiming, "Our backs and shoulders hurt. We can't keep working this hard if we want to live a long life." That was their choice, and while it may sound cold, I thought they should live their lives as they please. So I didn't say anything. The situation changed a month after they quit their jobs. They came to our apartment asking for financial assistance. "We don't have much in savings. If your parents are struggling, it'll be a problem for you too, Daniel," I said. So we were convinced, and Daniel decided we would help with their rent and living expenses. They lived in a high-security 4-bedroom apartment close to the station, and the rent was through the roof. After they left, cheerful about the financial help, I asked Daniel, "What about our own living expenses?" "Betty can cover our costs. I'm going to give my salary to Mom and Dad," he said. I wasn't happy. The thought of divorce crossed my mind. "You should consider yourself lucky. A woman over 30, marrying a younger handsome guy like me. You're already winning," that's what he always said, making me feel worthless. I couldn't muster the courage to leave him. If Daniel quit his job, sending money to his parents would be difficult. When I asked about this, He was too engrossed in his video game to pay any attention. "Hey, what about the money for David and Catherine?" Chopping carrots vigorously, I questioned him. "Damn Daniel," clicked his tongue. "Obviously Betty will cover that. We're a couple. We're supposed to support each other until I find a suitable job. Then he will hold the fort." He went back to his game. I don't make a lot of money, and I was anxious about what the future held, but there was nothing I could do. Life slowly changed. We started draining our savings to help his parents. Daniel, although jobless, did nothing around the house. When I complained, he would say, "I should have never married an older woman. You're also needy. You don't appreciate having a husband like me." As for his parents, they started complaining about the insufficient amount we were sending. "So, Betty, you're this age and not making much money. Have you been slacking off?" "Well, since Daniel used to be the one supporting you, it's high time you step up," they admonished me. I started doing some freelance illustrator work after my regular job just to bring in more money. Daniel, meanwhile, showed zero interest in looking for a job. He considered suitable for himself. My love for Daniel, who spends his days playing video games at home or asking me for money to go to the casino, was running thin. When should we get a divorce? I wondered. Thinking about when to divorce, yet what if the rest of my life is just me all alone? Kept me from taking the plunge. Then, one day after work, I was greeted by a stranger while I was in the supermarket. Who are you? You don't remember me, do you? We met at the wedding. I was friends with Daniel. I'm John." Taking a closer look at John's cheerful face, I couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, John, you were one of the few friends Daniel invited to our wedding." Apparently, just like me, John, in his suit, was filling his shopping cart with plenty of groceries. "I'm sorry I didn't recognize you. My husband has spoken highly of you." "Well, the thing is, I've actually cut ties with Daniel. I saw you and wondered if you're doing okay, so I thought I'd say hi." I was surprised to hear John speak of his friendship with Daniel in the past tense. I never thought he had actually severed ties. John then proceeded to explain to my astonished self that the reason Daniel held our wedding in my hometown wasn't out of kindness. The truth was, Daniel had very few friends. Apparently, Daniel spent most of his student life on slot machines and had a habit of borrowing money without paying it back. John was one of Daniel's college friends, and he was no exception. He had lent Daniel money, but never got repaid. The reason he continued the friendship was that they worked at the same company, and John didn't want to rock the boat. Once Daniel quit his job, he immediately reached out to John for more money. That was the last straw for John. He cut off all contact. Do you know why Daniel was forced to quit his job? Forced to quit? I heard he left because he didn't get along with his boss. That's not it. Daniel was fired because they found out he was going to casinos when he was supposed to be on sales calls. I was shocked. This man, Daniel, had been lying to me since the beginning of our marriage. I thought of the spell that made me believe women over 30 are worthless. It finally broke. The feeling of, "I can't forgive him," washed over me like a wave. I thanked John in a trembling voice for telling me the truth and said goodbye. A few days later, I spoke up to Daniel. "Daniel, I quit my job." Daniel, finally pausing his video game, looked utterly shocked. I put my mobile phone on the table, its screen displaying my banking app. "I have pretty much run out of savings since I have been sending money to David and Catherine. We have been bleeding cash. You have also been taking money from me for casinos and games. We're out of money." Daniel let out a voice of despair saying, "What? What the heck is this?" Given that our savings had dwindled down to almost nothing, His despair was understandable. What are we going to do now? How are we supposed to live if you quit your job when we're already low on money? That's not my problem. Speaking of which, I have loans I need to pay back. Could you maybe find a job quickly, Daniel? I want to take some time off and relax at home. Isn't it normal for spouses to support each other? It's hard for me to work now that I'm over 30, so now it's Daniel's turn to support me, I said. Daniel, in disbelief, immediately called his parents. As soon as I told his parents about our situation, they showed up at our house. They began to berate us for not having money, searching the house, suspecting we must have hidden it somewhere. But there was no money to be found. What was this large withdrawal? They questioned. That money was used to pay back debts, I answered accurately. That money was used to pay back a loan Daniel had taken from a friend. My own savings weren't enough, so I had to take out another loan to repay Daniel's friend. Who did you pay back? And why would you even bother paying back a loan now of all times? I only paid it back because I heard from John that Daniel had a lot of debt. I think it was the right thing to do, I calmly explained. Daniel was the first to start yelling, "Let's divorce." Even my parents-in-law agreed with Daniel. They forced me into their car and took me to the courthouse where I had to file for divorce on the spot. "Glad I won't have to see your broke old face anymore," Daniel said before leaving. I immediately headed to a cafe where John was already waiting. "John, sorry for the trouble. I was able to file for divorce successfully." "Oh, good. I was worried, so it's a relief. Actually, Daniel was the one who told me he wanted a divorce. But this was all a plan between John and me. Simply saying I wanted a divorce would have led to Daniel and his parents making a fuss, as they wouldn't want to let go of their cash cow. I figured the quickest way to sever ties with Daniel and his parents was to prove I had no value as their financial source. Fortunately, my side job as an illustrator had started to pay off, and I had saved quite a bit. I had this money deposited into a bank account that I kept hidden from Daniel and his parents. It's true that I repaid the money Daniel had borrowed from John, but I had actually given John more money than that amount. It was all part of the plan to lower my bank balance, and John was more than happy to go along with it. After successfully filing for divorce, John met me at the cafe to return the extra money. However, the envelope he handed me contained all the money I had given him. "John, this is too much. The money Daniel borrowed belongs to you, doesn't it?" "No, I only lent money to Daniel, not to you. When I gave Daniel the money, I had no intention of getting it back. I cut ties with him because I didn't like his attitude afterwards. So, this is all your money. Having a bit more cash can't hurt when you're rebuilding your life." I could only feel gratitude toward John, who said this with a smile. He had opened my eyes to Daniel's true nature and had been part of my plan to divorce. I tried to give him some money as a token of my gratitude, but he only accepted enough to cover his coffee at the cafe. After meeting John, I stopped by my former workplace. I had left my hidden bank account card with the CEO for safekeeping. Though my boss understood my situation and regretted my departure, I had no choice but to quit since Daniel knew where I worked and could potentially cause trouble later. "It's been tough, but I wish you all the happiness in the world," he said, as my coworkers gifted me a beautiful dress and shoes. Then I headed out of my home in just a t-shirt, jeans, and sandals. They had gone shopping for me at a nearby store. It's a gift. I hope you find happiness moving forward. Leading my wonderful colleagues was hard, but I felt blessed to have worked in such a supportive environment. I decided to go back to my parents' house. When I was dragged to court from the home I had shared with Daniel, I had packed my work supplies and valuables in a bag so I could immediately start working as a freelance illustrator. Thankfully, my freelance work kept me financially stable. Daniel and his family, on the other hand, weren't so lucky. They couldn't pay the rent for the house they lived in and were evicted. They moved into the house Daniel and I used to share, but they lost that one too when they couldn't pay the rent. Daniel desperately started looking for a new job, but his gap in employment and homelessness made it difficult for him to find one. Currently, it seems they're living in a makeshift shack by a river near their old house. I know this because Daniel reached out to me once when I answered the call from a public phone. Daniel was crying and told me how sorry he was. I have realized I can't live without you, Betty. Can we please start over? You regretted marrying an older woman, didn't you? I'm done being your cash cow. Goodbye. After that call, I never answered another from a public phone. The parents' house is quite a distance away from where Daniel is located in the countryside. Daniel, who doesn't have much money, probably can't afford to make the journey all the way here. The lesson I've learned from my failed marriage is that there's no rush to get married, whether you're 30 or 50. Living the way you want to is what truly matters. For making me realize that, I guess I owe Daniel a tiny bit of thanks.
I've always believed in making my own way, so living solo in this bustling city, just a stone's throw from where I work as an editor at a large book publishing, has been perfect for me. My folks, bless them, are just a phone call away, but here in the city, it's all on me. This one Saturday, needing a break from the usual, I decided to swap out manuscripts for some fresh air and headed to the nearby park. It's my go-to spot for some quiet, usually. I was lost in thought, maybe more than I should have been, because I didn't see the bike path up ahead. "Watch out," that was the first thing he said to me. I jumped back just in time as this guy on a bicycle screeched to a halt right where I would have been a second later. "Jesus, lady, you trying to get yourself killed?" he snapped, catching his breath. He was clearly annoyed, but also seemed relieved that he hadn't hit me. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking. Are you okay?" I stammered, feeling like a complete fool. "Yeah, I'm fine. No thanks to you, though. You gotta watch where you're going." His tone was harsh, but his concern seemed genuine. I know, I just zoned out." "Thanks for stopping in time," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. He ran a hand through his hair, looking a bit calmer. "All right, no harm done, I guess. But maybe keep off the bike lane, huh?" "Deal," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm Jenna, by the way." "Tom," he said, offering a hand, which I shook. "So, Jenna, always this distracted, or is it just my lucky day?" "Only on Saturdays," I quipped back, feeling a bit more at ease. We both laughed, and somehow, that awkward start turned into coffee at the nearby cafe. Turns out Tom worked at a car sales company. He was straightforward, kinda blunt, but funny. We talked about everything from books, which he admitted he didn't read much of, to cars, which I knew nothing about. It was easy, simple conversation, the kind where you suddenly realize hours have passed. "Didn't think I'd end up spending my afternoon with the woman who almost wrecked my biki," Tom said as we stood up to leave. "And I didn't think I'd be thanking the same guy who called me a killer on our first chat," I shot back, laughing. "Well, guess we're both full of surprises. Can I see you again, Jenna? Maybe on a day when you're not in the path of moving vehicles?" I nodded, smiling. "I think I can arrange that." Over the next few weeks, Tom and I started seeing each other more often. At first, it was just casual coffee dates and walks through different parts of the city. He had a rough way of talking, but it grew on me. It felt real and down to earth. Before I knew it, these friendly meetups turned into late-night talks. dinners at places that became our spots, and slow revealing conversations about our lives. There was something about Tom that felt familiar and exciting at the same time. I was drawn to his blunt charm, and from those ordinary meetings, an affair began. The more things progressed with Tom, the more inevitable it became that I'd meet his folks. They lived in the suburbs, a nice big house with a yard and all. Tom had warned me his mom was a bit traditional, but I wasn't prepared for just how much. We pulled up to their house, and right from the start, it was clear his parents had been eagerly waiting for us. His mom, a robust lady with a warm smile, welcomed us at the door, enveloping Tom in a big hug and giving me a once-over that felt a bit too long. "Jenna, dear, it's so nice to finally meet you. Tom has told us so much about you," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like she was trying to figure out my dress size than welcome me. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper. It's great to meet you too," I replied, trying to match her warmth. We sat down in the living room, and Mrs. Harper wasted no time diving into the conversation. "So, Jenna, Tom tells us you work at a publishing house. That must be exciting, handling books all day." "It is, Mrs. Harper. I love my job. It's fulfilling to be part of the creative process," I said, glancing at Tom, hoping he'd help steer the conversation. "That's nice, dear. But, once you two settle down, you'll need to think about what's really important. Family should come first, and a woman's touch in the home is irreplaceable," she said, not missing a beat. Tom's dad, who had been quietly observing the exchange, chimed in with a nod. "Absolutely. A stable home is the foundation of a good life. Right, son?" Tom shifted uncomfortably but managed a nod. "Yeah, Mom. Jenna's really great at managing her time, though. She's pretty organized and sharp." "Well, of course, but managing a home is different, It's a full-time commitment," his mom countered, fixing her gaze on me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I cleared my throat, feeling the need to defend my position. "I believe it's possible to balance both, Mrs. Harper. I think a modern family can have 2 working parents. It's all about teamwork, isn't it?" Mrs. Harper smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh dear, that's a nice thought. But in reality, children need their mother, and a house needs a woman's touch, not just a quick sweep." The conversation drifted to other things, but the seed had been planted. Dinner was served, and it was like sitting in a minefield. Every compliment about the food felt like a veiled suggestion for me to take notes. "Jenna, do you cook often?" Mrs. Harper asked as she served a perfectly roasted chicken. "Sometimes, when I can. Work keeps me pretty busy," I replied, trying to keep it light. "Ah, well, you'll find great satisfaction in keeping your family fed and your house in order. There's a rhythm to it that's quite fulfilling," she explained, passing the mashed potatoes like she was handing down wisdom. Tom kicked me under the table lightly, a silent signal to not get riled up. I just smiled, sipping my wine a bit more than usual, thinking about how this dinner was more an interview than a meal. Tom and I decided to tie the knot after a year of dating, despite the reservations I had from meeting his parents. Love, as they say, makes you hopeful. We planned a modest wedding, just close family and friends, nothing fancy, just how we both wanted it. Or so I thought. The wedding day was a blur of smiles, flowers, and a small crowd of well-wishers at a local community hall we'd booked. It was quaint, draped in simple decorations, and there was an air of excitement. Or maybe that was just my nerves. The ceremony was short and sweet. We exchanged vows, rings, and a kiss that sealed the deal. Everyone clapped, and it felt right at that moment, at least at the reception while we were munching on finger food. Tom leaned over and said, "So I was thinking about our next steps, about moving into a bigger place." I nodded, munching on a celery stick. "Sure, we talked about needing more space. What did you find?" "There's this great apartment, bigger and really nice. It's actually near where I grew up," he added, watching my reaction closely. "Near your parents?" I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. "Yeah, it's convenient, and Mom and Dad would be thrilled to have us close by. Plus, Dad mentioned he could help us out with the rent for a bit." I paused, thinking about the constant visits from his mom I'd have to endure. That's generous, but Tom, you know how I value our independence. I don't want to feel like we're not on our own. Tom squeezed my hand. I get it, Jenna, but think about it. It's a good financial move, and it'll be nice to have family nearby, for when we decide to start our own. I wasn't convinced, but decided to give it a shot. Okay, we can try it. But if it feels too crowded, we need to reconsider. All right, deal. Tom smiled, and we went back to entertaining our guests. Moving in was a hassle. The apartment was indeed spacious and had a lovely view of a nearby park, but it was also a 40-minute drive from my work, which added to my daily commute. Tom's parents, true to form, were over often. His mom came by with housewarming gifts, which were really just ways to imprint her taste on our decor. Jenna, dear, I brought you some nice curtains, much better than those drab ones you picked out, she said one afternoon, holding up a garish set of floral curtains. Thanks, Mrs. Harper, but I actually like the ones we have. I tried to keep my tone light. Oh, but these will brighten up the living room so much more, she insisted, already walking over to change them. The tension was palpable each time she visited, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Tom did his best to mediate, but it was clear that his idea of close to family and mine were worlds apart. Over time, the topic of how we should live our lives began cropping up more frequently. Tom increasingly expressed his preference for traditional family roles. Jen, think about it. You managing the home, me bringing in the cash. It just makes sense, he'd argue, his voice firm as if that settled the matter. But look at this, I'd respond, pulling up our budget on my laptop. 2 incomes, especially now with everything that's going on, pandemics, economic dips. It just makes more sense. We're more secure this way. Tom would shake his head, clearly frustrated. That's not how a family should work. It's not just about money, Jenna. But it is about stability, Tom. And us both working doesn't mean we can't have a great home life. I tried to reason, but it felt like talking to a wall. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harper practically turned our apartment into her second home. She was over all the time, and every visit felt like an inspection. Jenna, you're not thinking of staying in that job forever, are you? She'd start as soon as she walked in. I actually enjoy my work, Mrs. Harper. It's important to me, I'd say, trying to keep my voice steady and polite. She'd tisk and start prowling around the apartment, her fingers sliding over surfaces looking for dust. Well, if you were home more, maybe this place would be cleaner, she'd say, holding up her dusty finger like it was evidence in a trial. It's clean enough. We live here. It's not a museum, I'd shoot back, feeling my patience thinning. But she'd already be on to her next inspection point, flinging open the refrigerator to critique my grocery choices. This isn't enough food for a healthy meal. And look at these leftovers. Don't you cook fresh? She'd complain, her nose wrinkling in disapproval. I tried talking to Tom about it. Your mom is overstepping, and it's stressing me out. I can't keep up with her expectations. Tom, ever the peacemaker, would sigh. She's just trying to help, Jenna. Maybe if you were home more, things wouldn't be so tense. One evening, after a particularly hard day at work, I came home to find Tom in a foul mood. This place is a mess, Jenna, and dinner's just... It's not up to par, he said, poking disdainfully at the pasta I had whipped up. I'm doing my best, Tom. I'm working full-time and trying to keep up with the house. But it's never good enough for you or your mom, I snapped, frustration boiling over. Well, maybe if you weren't trying to do both, you'd actually do one right, he shot back, his words sharp and cutting. I was taken aback. Are you saying I need to choose between my job and our home? If you can't handle both, then yes, maybe you should just be a housewife. Honestly, if things don't change, I don't see how this can work out, he threatened, his tone cold and serious. I felt a chill run down my spine. The man I loved was giving me an ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Be a housewife or bust. It was clear that the life I had built, my career, my independence, was slipping through my fingers. The more I tried to cling to it, The tension in our home was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom and I were at a breaking point over my career and our lifestyle. I loved him deeply, so I made a choice that I thought could smooth things over. I went to my boss and laid it out. I was quitting to be a full-time housewife. My boss was shocked, disappointed even. He knew how much my career meant to me. But then he offered a lifeline, remote work. I could still edit, only from home. It wasn't ideal, but it felt like a compromise I could live with without completely losing myself. I didn't tell Tom about the remote work arrangement. Instead, I told him I had quit my job to focus on our home. His face lit up in a way that both warmed and broke my heart. "That's great, Jen. It'll be better for us, you'll see," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like he was clinging to newfound peace of mind. I threw myself into the role of housewife, handling the chores, cooking meals, and making sure everything was just right for when he came home from work. But as soon as he left for work each morning, my laptop opened, and I was back at my editor's desk remotely. The balance was precarious, juggling my secret work life with the domestic life Tom believed I had embraced. I funneled the money I earned into a separate account. It seemed smarter to have a financial cushion that Tom didn't know about, just in case. Living on just Tom's salary was his idea, and it strained our finances more than he realized. Just 3 months in, the cracks began to show. "We're running low on everything, Tom. We need to rethink our budget." I approached the topic one evening, hoping for a rational conversation. "What are you talking about? You're just not managing our money right. You need to cut back on spending," he snapped back, frustration lacing his words. His words stung. I hadn't bought anything for myself in ages, always hunting for deals and scrimping wherever I could. "I've been as frugal as possible. It's not enough," I insisted, my voice tight with hurt. The next day, as if on cue, Mrs. Harper showed up at our door. "Tom told me you're having trouble with the budget. Let me show you how to shop properly," she declared, her tone brooking no argument. The following days were a crash course in extreme penny pinching. She dragged me to the store, pointing out the cheapest items, many of which were of questionable quality. "These are what you should be buying, Jenna. None of that fancy stuff," she instructed, her voice harsh as if I was a wayward child. She even showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer, her eyes sharp. "You'll learn to make do with less. It's good for you," she said, nodding to herself more than to me. Every receipt was scrutinized, every expenditure questioned. "Why did you buy this? You don't need to be traveling around when there's work to be done here," she scolded when she saw a bus ticket stub. It was more than just saving money. It felt demeaning, like I was under constant surveillance. Living this way, under the strict rules dictated by Tom and enforced by his mother, was stifling. One afternoon, I locked myself in the bedroom and called my mom. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore," I started, my voice cracking a bit as I explained how Mrs. Harper had been teaching me to stretch every dollar to the extreme, making me feel like I was living in the Great Depression. "That's not normal, Jenna," my mom said firmly. "You're supposed to be partners. It sounds like she's trying to control everything, and Tom should not be letting this happen." I sighed, feeling a small wave of relief just hearing her say it. "I know, Mom. It's just so hard. I try to stand up for myself, but it always turns into a huge fight." Just as I was about to say more, the bedroom door swung open. Tom stood there, his face twisted in anger. He had overheard me. Without a word, he marched over, grabbed the phone from my hand, and ended the call. "A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some kind of traitor," he snapped, his voice cold and harsh. I was stunned. "Tom, I was talking to my mom. I needed someone to talk to." "That doesn't give you the right to badmouth us, especially not to your mother," he retorted, his eyes narrowing. The argument spiraled from there, voices raised, words that couldn't be taken back. In a huff, Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He was gone for the rest of the day, leaving me alone with my thoughts, which were a tangled mess of sadness and frustration. It was well past midnight when I heard the key turn in the lock. Tom stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. His usual stern demeanor was replaced by a sloppy, cruel drunkenness. "I should have listened to my mom. She warned me about marrying someone like you," he slurred, his words like daggers. I stood up, my own anger rising. "Tom, you're a grown man. Stop letting your mother run our lives. You don't need her approval for every little thing." That seemed to set him off even more. "If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave?" he yelled, stepping close, his voice booming in the confined space of our apartment. "It's 3 a.m., Tom. It's not safe," I replied, trying to reason with him. Even as my voice shook, "I don't care. Get out," he shouted, not even looking at me. I hesitated only for a moment before I started to pack the essentials, my phone, some clothes. When I went to grab my wallet, Tom snatched it from my hands. "I earned this money, Jenna. You have no right to it," he said, venom in his tone. Panic surged through me, but then I remembered my own account, my secret safety net. I called a taxi and left without looking back, Tom's angry shouts fading behind me as I closed the door. I found temporary shelter in a nearby hotel. The morning after leaving Tom, I was up early, my mind racing with all that needed to be done. The first stop was a lawyer's office. It was a small, unassuming place, but the lawyer, Mr. Edwards, was sharp and kind. He listened as I laid out everything that had happened, nodding in understanding. "We'll get the divorce papers drawn up right away. You have rights, Jenna, and we'll make sure you're protected," Mr. Edwards assured me, his voice firm and confident. Armed with my newly drafted divorce papers, I returned to the apartment where Tom and I had lived. The place was silent, the remnants of last night's chaos evident. I began packing my things quickly, stuffing clothes, books, and personal items into boxes and bags. The reality of leaving this chapter behind felt both liberating and heavy. As I zipped up the last suitcase, Tom stirred on the couch. "Jenna, hey, can you grab me a beer?" he mumbled, still half asleep, not even noticing the suitcases. Instead of a beer, I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of him. "Here's what I can give you," I said, my voice steady. Tom blinked slowly, coming to. He picked up the papers, scanning them, a smirk appearing on his face. "What's this? You're serious? Come on, Jen. You'll come back. Just say sorry to me and my mom. Promise to follow the rules, and we can forget all this," he said. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. "No, Tom. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. This is goodbye," I said. I left the apartment, the door closing behind me with a click that sounded like the locking of my past. I moved into a rented apartment that afternoon, a small place but mine alone. Returning to work full-time at the office felt like stepping back into a world where I was in control. The familiar buzz of the office, the clack of keyboards, and the scent of coffee brewing. Everything reminded me why I loved my job. I also reconnected with my friends and my parents, rebuilding the bridges that had been strained during my turbulent marriage. Catching up over long dinners and weekend brunches, I shared laughs and stories, feeling the strength of these relationships that had weathered so much. One late afternoon, as I was wrapping up a manuscript, my phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I saw a name I hadn't expected, Claire, a close friend from the city who had been my sounding board through the worst of times. "Hey, Claire, what's up?" I answered, smiling as I heard her enthusiastic voice. "Jenna, I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, a few of us are getting together this weekend at that new cafe downtown. You have to come. It's been ages, and everyone's dying to see you." The cafe meetup turned out to be just what I needed: laughter, updates, and a gentle nudge back into the social world. It felt good to be among friends, to share stories, and listen to theirs, feeling the camaraderie that I'd missed. As the gathering wound down, Claire caught me by the arm as we were leaving. "Hey, how are you really doing, Jen?" she asked, her gaze piercing but kind. I took a deep breath, letting the truth surface. I'm getting there, Claire. It's been tough, but I think I'm finally moving forward, for real. A few months into my new old life, my phone rang while I was reviewing a particularly challenging manuscript. The screen flashed Tom's name. Taking a deep breath, I answered, my voice cool and collected. Jenna, hey, I need to talk to you. Tom's voice came through, hesitant and a bit desperate. What is it, Tom? I asked, not really in the mood for pleasantries. Well, I got fired, he blurted out, and things are tight. I was wondering, you need money? I finished for him, not surprised by the turn of the conversation. Yeah, and, well, I was thinking maybe we could start over, you know. If you apologize to my mom and me, and we could try again, you could take care of us. His voice was hopeful, almost pleading. I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter. The idea was so ludicrous, it took me a moment to gather myself. Tom, you're joking, right? You want me to apologize, support you, and come back to all that mess? You've ditched your principles pretty fast, haven't you? There was a silence on the other end. So, is that a no? Tom finally asked. Yes, Tom, that's a no, a big one, I replied, still chuckling at the absurdity. I'm doing well, really well, actually, and I'm not about to give up my freedom and happiness for another round of whatever that was. Hanging up, I shook my head in disbelief. The call was a stark reminder of how far I had come and how much I had changed. I was free, truly free, and it felt liberating. I turned back to my manuscript, a smile playing on my lips. The idea of jumping back into a relationship wasn't appealing at the moment. I was enjoying my independence too much, savoring the peace that came with it.
My name is Tiffany, and things started to go wrong when I was just 17 years old. I grew up in what I believed to be a fairly typical family. There I was with my 10-year-old younger brother and our parents. My grandpa had started the family firm from the ground up, and Dad was a manager there. It all began with a network of coffee shops, which developed into this significant, high-end coffee enterprise. You know, Grandpa was a tremendous go-getter. However, he didn't simply sell the company or let it go when he made the decision to retire. No, it was his offer to Mom. I recall hearing that talk overheard. Let John handle it. I'm happy being a housewife, Mom said in a voice as plain as day. That was the end of it. After Dad took over, things continued. I didn't become aware of the gaps in our family's foundation until I was in my teens. Dad and Mom started fighting more and more. Mom was critical of everything Dad did or did not do. She seemed to be attempting to agitate him and test his limits. And she'd play the victim until he'd ultimately crack and raise his voice. She would cry to everyone who would listen, "See how he treats me. He yells at me, and all I'm trying to do is keep this family together." I was at a loss for what to think. Despite my affection for both of my parents, I could not stand to see them fight so much. Although my brother was too little to fully comprehend what was going on, I could always see the terror and bewilderment in his eyes when Mom and Dad got into a fight. Everything came to a head one night. A crash occurred as I was in my room, attempting to use music to block out their most recent disagreement. With my pulse pounding, I dashed downstairs to discover a scene that would forever alter my life. Dad was standing over Mom, who was lying on the floor. He hit me. She screamed. Dad had a desperate expression. Tiffany, I didn't touch her. I was attempting to help her up when she fell. However, Mom had already picked up the phone to dial the cops. I was paralyzed in place, unsure of who to trust or how to go. I had the impression that everything in my universe was crumbling around me. I will never forget the night the cops took my father away. I was restless and had a lot of questions in my head. What actually took place? Could Dad really hit Mom? If he didn't lie, why would Mom do it? The days that followed were a haze. Mom dropped the complaint in an act of what she termed kindness, and Dad was freed without being charged. However, the harm had already been done. There was too much stress in our home. With unrelenting intensity, Mom portrayed Dad as this monster who had been torturing her for years. When Dad wasn't there, she would say to me, "He's always had a temper. I have shielded Tommy and you from the worst of it." The divorce proceeded more quickly than I could comprehend. Dad was packing his only luggage one day, feeling disoriented in his own house. With a broken voice, he apologized to the children. "I swear, I'll make this right." However, how was he able to? After the divorce, Mom inherited everything, including the house, the vehicle, and even Dad's job at the firm. There was nothing left for him. Tommy and I were seated for a family meeting by Mom after Dad departed. "Now things will be different," she remarked, grinning but without showing her eyes. "We're safe. Your father can't harm us anymore." Young and naive, Tommy said, "But when is Dad coming home?" Mom mustered another grin, but her face tightened for a moment. "Oh, sweetie, we'll be fine without Dad. He needs some time to work on himself." I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something wasn't quite right, but Mom would always brush me off when I attempted to challenge her account of what happened. "Tiffany, you're too young to understand," she would sneer. "Relationships between adults are complex." Then just 2 months after the split, Mom made another shocking revelation. She said, "Kids, I have wonderful news," one evening. I am getting hitched. I was taken aback. Wed? However, just 2 months have passed since. Mom cut in, "I know it seems fast, but you just know when you find true love." It was love at first sight between Robert and me. I was feeling ill. How could she get over this so fast? How about Dad? How about us? Not long after, my new stepfather Robert arrived in. He appeared to get along well with Tommy, so I think he was all right. He didn't really pay much attention to me. I felt even more alone when I heard them giggling and playing video games together. In the meantime, Mom took over the family business and hired Robert to work with her. They were constantly discussing business and plotting, and Tommy and I kind of got lost in the mix. I was disoriented and stuck between this new, unsettling reality and my memories of our family's past. I wondered where I belonged in now, and what actually occurred between Mom and Dad as I watched Mom and Robert swoon over one another at the dinner table, and Tommy cheerfully talking away. Mom dumped another bombshell on us just when I thought things couldn't be any more confusing. She and Robert made the decision to relocate the company's headquarters to a new location that was claimed to have better financial prospects. All of the capital was going to be moved to this new subsidiary. I didn't give it much thought at first. Moving would be awful, but at least our family would be together, right? False. My mother knocked on my door one evening as I was in my room finishing my schoolwork. "You know Robert and I are moving for work, Tiffany." "Honey." "Yes, when are we leaving?" I asked, visualizing packed my room already. Mom's lip twisted into something I didn't quite understand. "That's the issue, my dear. We decided that because you are almost done with high school and the new house isn't very spacious, it may be best if you stayed here." It was as though I had taken a hit to the belly. Remain in this place. However, Tommy is another story. Mom spoke hurriedly. "Tommy needs us more because he's younger. Furthermore, you wouldn't want to switch schools just before a test, would you? We believe that having you live with your granddad is better." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. I was going to be left behind by them. "But Mom, I want to be with you and Tommy. Can't we find a bigger place?" Mom's voice turned stern. "Tiffany, this has already been decided. It's for the best, trust me." And just like that, my world turned upside down again. Within weeks, Mom, Robert, and Tommy were gone, and I was moving in with Grandpa. Don't get me wrong, Grandpa's great, but I felt abandoned, cast aside like I didn't fit into their new perfect family. My 18th birthday rolled around soon after. I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that Mom and Robert would come back for it. But no, they were too busy with work to make it. Grandpa, bless him, threw me a party and let me invite my friends. It wasn't the same, but I appreciated his effort. The morning after my birthday, Grandpa called me into his home office. He had this serious look on his face as he handed me a small folder. "Happy birthday, Tiffany," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "This is my gift to you now that you're of age." Confused, I opened the folder and started reading the documents inside. My jaw dropped as I realized what I was holding. "Grandpa, this." He nodded, smiling. "That's right, kiddo, I'm giving you the company." I was speechless, me running a whole company at 18. "But Grandpa, I don't know the first thing about running a business." He chuckled. "You've got potential, Tiffany. I see it in you. You'll learn, and I know you'll do great things." Then his face turned serious again. "There's one more thing. I think you should reconcile with your father. Take him on as a consultant. He knows the business, and well, I think there are some things you need to hear from him." I hesitated. After everything Mom had said about Dad, I wasn't sure I wanted to see him, but Grandpa had never steered me wrong before. I met Dad at a small cafe downtown, my stomach in knots as I approached our table. I saw him stand up, a hesitant smile on his face. He looked older, more worn down than I remembered. "Tiffany," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "I understand you're angry. Your mother probably told you a lot of things about me." "Yeah, she did," I snapped. "How you were abusive, how you hit her." "How could you, Dad?" He took a deep breath. "Tiffany, what your mother told you is not true. I need you to listen to what really happened." For the next hour, Dad laid out a story that shook me to my core. He explained how Mom had deliberately provoked him, pushing his buttons until he was at his wit's end. The night I saw her on the floor, she had staged the whole thing. "Your mother took the police statement back in exchange for me not claiming any property in the divorce," Dad said, his voice heavy with pain. "She set me up, Tiffany. She wanted everything, and she got it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But why would Mom do that? And why didn't you fight back? Dad reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Because of this," he said, pressing play on an audio file. Mom's voice filled the air between us, cold and calculating. "John, here's the deal. You leave quietly, sign over everything to me, and I'll drop the charges. Fight me on this, and I'll make sure everyone believes you're an abuser. Your choice." I felt sick. "Dad, why didn't you use this in court? You could have proved your innocence." He shook his head sadly. "It wouldn't have changed the outcome, Tiffany. Your mother had made up her mind. But more importantly, I didn't want to put you through any more pain. You were already dealing with so much in your teenage years. You need support, not more family drama." Tears welled up in my eyes. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have known. I should have trusted you." Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm sorry too. I know I worked too much when you were younger. I should have been there more." We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of everything that had been said. Then, wiping my eyes, I remembered why I had originally reached out. "Dad, there's something else I need to tell you," I said, my voice shaky but determined. "Grandpa gave me the company for my 18th birthday." Dad's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pride. "Tiffany, that's incredible." Your grandfather always had a good eye for potential. He must see great things in you. I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. But Dad, I don't know the first thing about running a company. I need help. Without hesitation, Dad smiled. I'd be honored to help you, free of charge. I'll guide you through everything you need to know. As we continued talking, making plans for the future, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger at Mom for her deception, sadness for what our family had lost, but also hope. Hope that with Dad's help and Grandpa's faith in me, maybe I could turn this unexpected gift into something amazing. The months flew by as I settled into my new life with Grandpa. Before I knew it, I was donning a cap and gown, graduating high school with honors. It felt surreal walking across that stage without Mom, Robert, or Tommy in the audience, but Grandpa's proud face and Dad's supportive presence made up for it. With graduation behind me, I threw myself into preparing for college. Thanks to my grades and extracurricular activities, I managed to secure a full scholarship. I decided to major in business management. After all, I had a company to run now. The day I got my acceptance letter, Grandpa insisted on throwing a little celebration. Just the two of us, some cake and a toast to the future. We were in the middle of our second slice when the doorbell rang. Grandpa frowned. "Were you expecting anyone?" I shook my head, equally confused. When Grandpa opened the door, I nearly dropped my plate. There stood Mom and Robert, looking as if they owned the place. Mom barely glanced at me. Her eyes were fixed on Grandpa, her expression stormy. "Dad, we need to talk." Now, without waiting for an invitation, she strode into the living room, Robert trailing behind her. I watched, stunned, as she rounded on Grandpa. "Why can't I access the company accounts?" she demanded. "And who gave you the right to block the capital transfer to our new subsidiary?" Grandpa stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "Sarah, the company no longer belongs to you. It's Tiffany's now." Mom's jaw dropped. For a moment, she looked like a fish out of water. Then her eyes narrowed, darting between Grandpa and me. "What do you mean it's Tiffany's?" she hissed. "Exactly what I said," Grandpa replied. "I gave Tiffany the company for her 18th birthday. All decisions about its future and finances are hers to make now." The shock on Mom's face quickly gave way to a simpering smile as she turned to me. "Tiffany, sweetie, I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? We've settled in so well in the new city." I blinked, taken aback by her sudden change in demeanor. "We have a lovely house," she continued, her voice honey-sweet. "There's a big bedroom just for you, with plenty of space for a desk and computer. You could study and work from home. Wouldn't that be nice?" I felt a twinge in my chest. Part of me, the part that still longed for my mom's approval, wanted to say yes. But then I thought of everything I'd learned, everything I'd built here. "Thanks, Mom, but no," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I'm happy here. I have my friends, my life, and Grandpa. Besides, I start college soon." The tension in the room was palpable as I stood my ground against Mom's manipulations. Her sweet demeanor quickly soured when she realized I wasn't going to be swayed. "Fine," she snapped, her voice losing its sugary coating. "If you won't come to us, we'll move back here. We can all live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice, Tiffany?" I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of sadness and determination. "No, Mom, that's not going to happen either." I could see the anger building in her eyes, her facade crumbling rapidly. It was now or never. "Mom," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I want you to tell me the truth. What really happened between you and Dad? Why did you really get divorced?" For a split second, confusion flashed across Mom's face. Then, as if on cue, Tears welled up in her eyes. "Oh, Tiffany," she sobbed. "Your father, he was so cruel. He insulted me. He even hit me. I had to leave to protect myself, to protect you and Tommy." I felt a surge of anger at her lies. "Stop it, Mom. I know what really happened. I know you framed Dad. You set him up so you could divorce him and take everything for yourself." The tears vanished from Mom's eyes in an instant, replaced by a cold fury I'd never seen before. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You ungrateful child. You have no right to meddle in my personal life." She turned to Grandpa, her voice rising. "Everything here belongs to me. I decide who lives where and who gets what." Then she rounded on me again. "You will come home right now, Tiffany, and you will hand over that company to me where it belongs." I stood there, shocked by the venom in her voice, when Grandpa stepped forward. His face was a storm of disappointment and anger. "That's enough, Sarah," he said, his voice low but powerful. "You seem to have forgotten a few important details. This property, including your old house, belongs to me, not you. And the company now belongs to Tiffany. I gave it to her, and it's hers to do with as she sees fit." Mom's face went pale, then red with rage. She opened her mouth to argue, but Grandpa cut her off. "I've heard enough," he said firmly. "I'm ashamed of you, Sarah. I raised you better than this. Now I think it's time for you and Robert to leave. You can't kick us out." Mom shrieked. "I'm your daughter." Grandpa's expression was stone. "And Tiffany is my granddaughter, a granddaughter who has shown more integrity and strength in the past few months than you have in years. Now leave, both of you." I watched a mix of emotions swirling inside me as Grandpa ushered Mom and Robert to the door. Mom's face was a mask of fury and disbelief as the door closed behind them. As the sound of their car engine faded away, I sank onto the couch, feeling drained. Grandpa sat beside me, putting a comforting arm around my shoulders. As we sat there in silence, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The confrontation with Mom had been explosive, but somehow I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in our complicated family saga. The morning after Mom and Robert's dramatic exit, I woke to the sound of hushed voices downstairs. Curiosity getting the better of me, I crept down to find Grandpa and Dad in deep conversation in the study. "Tiffany," Dad said, noticing me first, "come in, sweetheart. We were just talking about you and Tommy when I entered the room, my confusion evident." "What about Tommy?" Grandpa cleared his throat. "I've asked your father if he'd be willing to seek custody of Tommy." My eyes widened. Really? But how? Dad nodded, a mix of determination and hope in his eyes. "Your grandfather thinks we have a strong case, especially with what he's discovered." Grandpa reached for a thick folder on his desk. "Tiffany, sit down. There's something you need to see." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed report from a private investigator. As I read, I felt my world tilt on its axis once again. "Mom was cheating on you." I looked at Dad, horrified. "With Robert for years," Dad nodded grimly. "It seems so." Grandpa pointed to several documents, hotel receipts, gift records, old text messages. "Your mother and Robert had been carrying on an affair long before the divorce." "But how did the investigator get all this information?" I asked, bewildered. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. Robert made a crucial mistake. He threw away his old phone when he bought a new one. Our investigator managed to recover it, and it was a goldmine of information. I felt sick. But why all the theatrics with the divorce then? Why accuse Dad of abuse? "It was Robert's idea," Grandpa explained, his voice heavy. "According to their messages on that old phone, He suggested she frame your father for domestic violence. It was all a ploy to ensure she got everything in the divorce. Tears stung my eyes, but Grandpa wasn't finished. There's more, he said, turning to another section of the report. That same phone revealed Robert's true nature. He's not who he claims to be. He's a con man, Tiffany. The phone had messages with other women. He targets wealthy women, marries them, and then disappears with their money. The pieces suddenly fell into place. That's why he was so keen on moving the company and transferring all the capital. I gasped. He was planning to steal it all along. Grandpa nodded gravely. Exactly. And there's one more thing you should know. I met with your mother and showed her all this evidence, but she refused to believe it. She's in deep denial about Robert's true nature and his intentions. I sat back, my mind reeling. What do we do now? We fight, Dad said firmly. For Tommy, for the company, for the truth. Grandpa nodded in agreement. I've already called my lawyer. We're going to file for custody of Tommy and take steps to protect the company's assets. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Dad fought tirelessly for custody of Tommy. I stood by them every step of the way, determined to bring my little brother home. The courtroom was tense as Mom tried to paint Dad as a monster, spinning tales of abuse and neglect. But her lies crumbled in the face of the mountain of evidence we had gathered. The judge listened intently as our lawyer presented the detective's findings, the recovered phone messages, the proof of Mom's affair, and the elaborate scheme she and Robert had concocted to frame Dad. I will never forget the expression on Mom's face when Dad was given full custody by the judge. It was a mixture of surprise, rage, and something else entirely. Maybe the first glimmer of recognition that her meticulously built world was coming apart. Not long afterward came the last blow. Robert revealed his true colors when he realized that Mom was now alone, without a place to live, and responsible for paying child support. Overnight, he vanished, taking off with another lady, leaving Mom with nothing but the fallout from her deeds. Mom made a frantic attempt to make amends with Dad. She came back to our old house, our home, and I was there, tears running down her cheeks as she pleaded for forgiveness. Dad, though, did not waver. With a firm voice, he apologized to Sarah. However, too much has transpired. You have my whole faith. Kindly depart. I felt a chapter of our life closing as the door closed on Mom's beseeching face. It was agonizing, yet liberating in an odd way. After then, life found its new rhythm. I immersed myself into my undergraduate coursework with the goal of becoming an expert in business management. I would devour corporate reports with my father in between lectures, learning from his wealth of experience and expertise. In order to give me time to learn the ropes without the strain of complete responsibility, he volunteered to operate the business until I graduated. Tommy flourished under Dad's care, even though he was still too little to properly comprehend everything that had transpired. Seeing them mend their connection was heartening. I saw the joy in Tommy's eyes when his father got home from work, or when we spent Friday evenings playing board games together. Being only a few blocks away, Grandpa was someone we visited frequently. Sunday meals developed into a much-loved custom. We were all four seated around his large oak table, laughing and telling each other tales. Grandpa would enthrall us with stories of his early years of founding the business, his eyes sparkling as he observed me taking in every nuance. I can't help but notice how much has changed as I sit here in my childhood bedroom, which seems like home again. We came to this point via a difficult and terrible journey filled with betrayals and harsh realities. However, it also resulted in the reconstruction of a family that was closer and stronger than before. I am aware that difficulties are ahead. It takes a lot of work to run a business, and our family turmoil will probably continue to have an impact for years to come. However, I'm not scared. At my side are Dad, Tommy, and Grandpa, and I feel prepared for whatever is ahead.
I'm Jack, a 32-year-old corporate employee. I work for a large trading corporation in the sales department. I don't want to boast, but I've consistently had the best sales performance. I think that's largely due to my competitive mentality. I became aware of my talent when I started working. I'm once again at the top of the sales pack this month. I closed my computer screen after letting out a sigh of satisfaction that everything was proceeding according to plan. Every day is the same for me. The best prize is that. Significant alterations to my everyday routine simply don't appeal to me. Only relaxed people, I believe, can achieve that. Some people say, I need some excitement. I feel bad for them. They don't recognize the importance of daily existence. Then, however, someone showed up who disturbed my pattern. Lucy, a younger female manager, was transferred to our department in April of last spring. She was my direct superior because of her title as assistant sales manager. I have always had trouble with women in general, but it's not like I have a grudge against her. This is for a reason. My mom fled the house, leaving my dad and me alone. Don't get me wrong, my dad wasn't violent or had a drinking issue whatsoever. Instead, Dad was frequently ill, and my mother was the one who looked after him. I'm not sure if she grew weary of taking care of him. As a middle schooler, she left a note and left when I got home. Take care of your dad for me. My mother's letter contained only that information. I recall being more awed by it than by loneliness or melancholy. I felt angry at my mother and found it difficult to control it. Dad accepted Mom's departure as if it were the most natural thing in the world and never placed blame on her. Thus, my dad and I were the only ones beginning our lives together. Dad needed government help because he was unable to work. I committed myself to helping my dad and our family by taking part-time jobs after high school. I had no time to enjoy being a normal young person. I learned to put up a brave front no matter what, because I never wanted sympathy from anyone. I suppose I must have been a rough kid. Unfortunately, Dad died 2 years ago, following a protracted illness. I didn't know what to do after I was released from taking care of my dad. I thought I was no longer valuable. Probably as a result of my dad's passing, I became more involved in my profession. I think this is when Lucy, who had been assigned in April, first talked to me. You're always top in sales, Jack, she said. I made the effort, even though it felt dull and like she was making small conversation. That's all. Although most people accept that reaction, I didn't try to come across as modest. Of course, it would be difficult to achieve such results otherwise. Lucy remarked that while nodding in agreement in front of the sales performance that was shown on the whiteboard. I can smell the lovely perfume she wears every time she nods. She patted my shoulder lightly and said, "Let's do our best this week too," before returning to her desk. Her left ring finger has a silver band on it. When I discovered she was married, I was a little surprised. In addition to being younger than I am, she doesn't seem married. Not so homely. That's how I felt. I found out the reason for this purely by chance. Every office has its share of gossip mongers, and ours was no exception, with many relishing in the rumors during their breaks. Today, one of the clerks was proudly sharing some juicy news she had overheard in the break room, and I just happened to overhear it. According to the office clerk, it seems that Lucy's husband passed away due to illness the year before last. This means she is a widow now. I heard it all happen so fast, from the time the illness was discovered to his passing. Hearing that, I stepped away from the break room. It was a bit surprising to think that someone as cheerful as Lucy had such a past. But then another thought crossed my mind. Why didn't she leave her husband? I wondered. Was it because his decline was so rapid, from treatment to demise? I believed that if her husband had struggled for a long time and had not died, Lucy would have left him. I know it's a biased thought, but this is something I know from my experience, and I believe it's the truth. What's wrong? Your coffee is going to get cold. Lost in these thoughts, I completely forgot to sip my coffee. By the time Lucy, who was next to me, pointed it out, I hardly took a sip, but it was already lukewarm. I'm sorry, I was spacing out a bit. Apologizing for being lost in thought during work, Lucy looked at me puzzled. Then, the next moment, she smiled brightly. Don't be silly. Everyone needs a break. No need to apologize. Her smile seemed dazzling to me. It was a wonder how she could smile like a sunflower blooming in summer. I awkwardly smiled back, but it probably looked like a ventriloquist dummy smiling. Don't force a smile. Save those smiles for the customers. After she jokingly said that, I covered my mouth with one hand, feeling as if everything was being seen through. I felt restless and uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I'm not good at smiling unintentionally. My true feelings slipped out. I had never said such a thing to anyone before. I was surprised at myself for revealing my true feelings to Lucy. Oh, is that so? For me, I find it hard to cry. Lucy gently brushed aside my true feelings and said so, as if we were exchanging our vulnerabilities. Maybe she was trying to be fair since she had inadvertently heard my weakness. In all things, Lucy was always like this. She treats everyone equally, lends a listening ear, gives encouragement, and brightens the atmosphere in our department by bringing everyone together. Lucy's reputation has soared, not just within our team, but across the whole department. By the time I saw her smile every morning, it had become the highlight of my day. Something unbelievable happened to me at the end of the month. I was left standing before the posted sales results. For the first time, I was in second place in sales performance. I couldn't hide my dismay, wondering if there had been some kind of mistake. The one who surpassed me and jumped to the top was a junior who had been hovering around the middle of the pack until last month. I had noticed they'd been putting in the effort after receiving advice from Lucy recently, but I never, not in a million years, thought they would surpass my sales performance. As I heard the cheers of my junior behind me, I kept telling myself to stay calm. Losing my composure was not an option. I must keep a straight face so as not to be caught off guard. The nails of my tightly clenched fist were digging into my palm. The one who gently wrapped around that fist was Lucy's slender finger, a fleeting moment as she passed by. Her fingertips seemed to soothe me, as if to say, "It's okay." Involuntarily, I looked up. Without looking back at me, Lucy walked straight toward my junior and congratulated him. The touch of her fingers lingered on my fist. It felt as if her feelings were flowing into me through her fingertips, a strange sensation. The tension of my clenched fist gradually eased. I could feel my strained emotions lightening. I won't lose next month. I conveyed my genuine feelings to my junior. The words came out naturally, probably thanks to Lucy. Lucy looked at me and smiled brightly. It was her usual radiant smile, like a sunflower. After work that day, we finally had Lucy's welcome party within our team. The team's party planner had booked a stylish Spanish restaurant. Our team always had high attendance at these parties, thanks to his efforts to find various interesting places for every gathering. This time, too, almost everyone was attending. We enjoyed exotic dishes and delicious wine. Under normal circumstances, I'd probably enjoy myself more, but I was a bit different tonight. I couldn't stand the fact that my sales performance was surpassed by a junior colleague. The supposed relief I felt was stirred awkwardly again by drinking alcohol. This feeling of irritation shrouded my chest and invited a worse state of drunkenness. I'm definitely not a bad drunk. I'm always properly paced, and getting disorderly is unthinkable. But tonight was different. I couldn't disguise my emotions and overtly avoided Lucy. "Please drink over there, don't mind me." "Don't worry, I'll work harder from next month." I confronted Lucy, who had just sat next to me, and started talking with slurred words. Come on, don't dislike me that much, Lucy said, trying to calm me down. She seemed to act superior, even though she's younger, and it irritated me even more. How did you even get promoted? There's no way you can get promoted while taking care of a sick hand, can you? My mouth wouldn't stop in my drunken state. I know I'm in trouble in my head, but harsh words just keep spilling out of my mouth. Oh, you seem to know a lot. I'm a more capable woman than you think. Jack. Lucy brushed off my sarcasm with a complacent attitude. Even that attitude started to anger me. Jack, you struggle with women, don't you? She said with a mischievous grin, making my heart race, and I unintentionally got lost for words. See? Bullseye. Spot on, right? She continued. That's why, whatever you say, Jack, it's fine by me. Taking a sip of red wine, Lucy said it with a straight face. This is her true feeling, I thought. It's like she thinks she knows everything about me. What do you know about me, being younger and all? I found myself getting defensive. The room's atmosphere suddenly turned icy. It seems my voice was louder than I thought. I do know. Too bad you don't like me, do you, Jack? She said, sticking out her tongue in a teasing manner. Lucy seemed to provoke me. I, irritated, unintentionally stood up from my chair. Lucy looked up at me with challenging eyes. I never said such a thing, she said. I can tell, even if you don't say it, I replied. She pouted her lips, somehow looking a bit sullen. After a few similar exchanges, I was the one who lost my cool first. I drank the wine I had in my hand in one go and leaned toward Lucy, shouting, That's what I'm saying, I like you. In that moment, Lucy, with wide-open eyes, looked up at me. Being able to surprise her, I felt satisfied. In the next moment, I blacked out. The next day, I woke up in my room with a hand holding my aching head. I was so embarrassed about making a fool of myself at the party that I wished the ground would swallow me up. Alone, I tossed and turned in bed. You're awake, huh? What I heard from the kitchen was Lucy's voice, and I was so startled. It felt like my heart might jump out of my mouth. Jack, you passed out after that. Tom and I brought you back. We missed the last train, so we had to impose. Approaching with a bottle of mineral water in one hand, Lucy looked somewhat refreshing without makeup. I'm so sorry. While accepting the bottle of mineral water, I apologized for my disgraceful behavior last night. Lucy smiled warmly and said, It's all right. Oh, but I also have something to apologize for. What is it? I asked, looking at her. Lucy, looking a bit guilty, clasped her hands together toward me. What on earth could she have done to me? I thought. If it's about what happened at the party, I really don't remember anything. I fought to turn off the TV, but it was left on, and then a DVD started playing. I saw Cute Jack. She sticks out her tongue and says, I'm sorry. I glanced toward the TV on the table in front of me. An old DVD case was carelessly left there. Recalling what was being watched, I felt embarrassed knowing that Lucy had seen such a thing. I really wished I could just find a hole and hide in it. You saw it, huh? I said, feel free to laugh. A grown man doing something like that, I uttered in despair. Why? She asked. I think it's wonderful. Remembering and valuing family is a wonderful thing, isn't it? I managed a wry smile as she asked me this, her face filled with curiosity. What Lucy happened to see was a home video taken when I was a child. It documented a time when I was most happy. My dad was still somewhat well, my mom was at home, and I was laughing innocently, oblivious to any hardships. This was filmed during a family outing to watch the blooming flowers, and my grandfather was the one shooting the video. He probably offered to handle the camera, so that the 3 family members could be framed in the shot. I was so young, adoring my parents, not having the slightest inkling that this happiness would crumble. Sometimes, I watched this video to remind myself that I, too, had happy moments. Not to forget that I was once like others, a person who was loved. This wonderful family fell apart a few years later. I felt the urge to tell Lucy everything then. About my father's illness, my mom running away, how I couldn't forgive myself, how I felt relieved more than sad when my father passed away. Normally, I'm good at putting on a facade, but with Lucy, only honest words come out. She was quietly listening to my life story. After finishing telling everything, I took a sip of mineral water. No wonder you despise women. Lucy quietly opened her mouth after listening to my life story. Lucy showed neither signs of pity nor ridicule. Her face accepted all the facts as they were. Can I share my story too? When my husband died, I felt relieved. At her unexpected confession, I inadvertently let out a breath. It was really hard until he passed, knowing the end was near, but having no other choice. I don't know how much I cursed God. Lucy smiled a bit sarcastically. That smile was twisted, totally different from her usual cheerful one. I wondered which one was the real her. I wanted to know more about her. Did you feel relieved when your husband passed away? I asked. I was aware that it was an insensitive question, but I wanted to confirm it with her. Yes, I did. I felt liberated, Lucy clarified. The liberation she felt was not from taking care of him. She seemed to think she was liberated from the fear of her husband being gone and the pity from those around her. Her husband's final moments weren't peaceful. It seems he suffered in pain until the end, crying out his desire to live. Lucy described his last moments as hellish. It was too much to face directly. I wanted to run away from there, to block my ears from hearing the prolonged beep of the heart monitor. She realized it was over. It was an insane moment. Ruminating, she broke down slightly. I couldn't start a family with him. I couldn't let him, who loved children, become a father, she concluded her story. I felt as if I had learned a secret hidden within her. Maybe she didn't ridicule me because she had experienced significant loss. Loss teaches you things, something Lucy knows firsthand. I wanted to say something comforting, but no words came to my mind. See you on Monday, then. Lucy left after saying this. After she left, I got out of bed to check the kitchen and found a pot of easy-to-digest vegetable soup on the table. There was a note, "Heat it up and eat." The refrigerator was stocked with sports drinks. Lucy's thoughtfulness, her affection, was appreciated. From this day on, Lucy's presence in my life grew increasingly significant. I found myself hoping that she felt the same. However, when I went to work on Monday, her attitude was no different than usual. I was taken aback, thinking we had a special connection, sharing secrets no one else knew. But no, it was just boss and subordinate. Nothing more, nothing less. Such a relationship continued until the next spring. It was almost a year since Lucy was transferred. When spring came, and the cherry blossoms were in full bloom, I felt lighthearted. Every year, perhaps my body remembers the joyful times. Sunday was the anniversary of my father's passing, so I went to visit his grave. I cleaned it neatly and offered fresh flowers, a candle, and a cigarette, his favorite, together. I remember my father sneaking cigarettes despite doctors' warnings. He would laugh while smoking in his sick bed, saying, "This is the one thing I can't give up." Thinking back, he might have been a strange father. I wonder what kind of life he would have led if he hadn't been sick. I watched the smoke from the candle and cigarette rise into the air, imagining his life. Usually, I would feel more depressed visiting this grave, but not this time. The lake inside my heart was still. I felt very flat, quiet, and calm. I think it was the first time I prayed with such feelings. I realized something is changing within me. My obsession with being the top in sales has relaxed, fluctuating between first and third place. I'm no longer disturbed by it. I'm even surprised at myself for being able to sincerely rejoice at my junior's growth and colleagues' efforts. She has undoubtedly changed me. Lucy's presence has changed me. I haven't told her, but I'm truly grateful to her from the bottom of my heart. Later, that confession video shown to me by a colleague at a drinking party is now a funny story. Huh, Jack. No way. Don't you think this is too much of a coincidence? Suddenly, a voice called out, and when I turned around, there was Lucy. She is holding flowers for the offering. Huck, Lucy, is your family's grave here too? Lucy shared that it's her husband's monthly Memorial Day. Somehow, I find myself helping out with the cleaning. Lucy carefully polishes the tombstone, offers a candle, and lights a cigarette, just like I do. My dad was the same. Cigarettes, I mention. Lucy smiles and says, "Really?" Such selfish people, really. Despite being sick, as she lights a per-second cigarette. They can smoke all they want in the afterlife, she says, laughing freely. Lucy looks up at the smoke rising to the sky and murmurs something to that effect. Her profile looks so bright and cheerful. Perhaps Lucy has also managed to sort out her feelings. Jack, ready to head back. Fania walked together, returning the ladle and bucket to the fountain and the precincts. Lucy invites me for a walk. It's a beautiful day. A walk sounds nice, I respond. Lucy guided me to a park near a temple known for its beautiful cherry blossoms. The fully bloomed cherry blossoms were visible even from afar. There were many people enjoying the cherry blossoms, and with stalls set up, it had a festive atmosphere. I narrowed my eyes at the familiar place, feeling a sense of nostalgia. You remembered? I mumbled inadvertently. I would never forget. I decided that day that we would come here together when the flowers bloomed, Lucy says, while looking at the cherry blossoms. While slowly walking among the blossoms, I steal glances at her profile. Seemingly noticing my gaze, our eyes suddenly meet, causing me to involuntarily stop in my tracks. I can't stand it anymore. I hate waiting, she suddenly says, puffing out her cheeks and stamping her foot. Faced with her childlike behavior, I find myself feeling flustered. What upset her? I'm sorry. I apologize. I say just in case, and the words of apology spill out. Seeing me like this, Lucy puffs her cheeks again. Really? You're hopeless, she says. Can I accept that confession? You did say you liked me at the bar, right? At the sudden confession, I inadvertently nod in agreement. I don't want to be your lover. I want to be your family, Jack. I want you to be a part of my family, Lucy says with a serious expression. I think ideally, I, as the man, should have said it first. I feel really bad for not having the courage. But Lucy had decided to confess to me in this park during the cherry blossom season. Are you sure about me? I'm not a good guy. I want you to cherish your wonderful family. That's why I want you, Jack, she says, hugging me tightly like a child. Her body is soft and slim, and I can smell her usual perfume. I'm sorry. Let me say it too. Please be my family, I say. At my words, Lucy tightens her arms around me. This must be her way of responding. We both carry a great sense of loss. Knowing this, I think we can cherish each other. I'll cherish you for a lifetime, I said with all my feelings. I'm sure there's no one else in the world to whom I would dedicate these words besides her. How did you find today's story? Hitting the subscribe and like button will motivate me to create more. I'm also looking forward to reading your comments. See you in the next video.